After our parents abandoned me and my child family only, I gave him a commodity, and he could not refuse a product that would eventually into our most provocative days. Hey, I'm Jack, and I never thought I'd end up in a circumstances like as this as I grew up. My Oliver and I established a kinship with the Unish family. That felt he was 5 times as young as you. Then me, the sprat I always watched out for the bone, I protected against abusers and assisted him with his coursework. But as we grew older, life started to draw us in. I went to counsel in several directions, as well as into the swimming pool when Oliver was still making my way through high school and discovering his identity. Our parents were always occupied with their professional commitments departing. They had little time to spend with their family. Absent, but not careless, it meant that of the duty to search, especially after Oliver landed on me. When I got older, I could drive and control the effects at home. It was, despite being laid back, Oliver wasn't a burden. Constantly willing to please and ready to, being around him made me grin. But it didn't feel like work. But after I relocated, the effects changed. I was 24 when I left and currently reside in a tiny apartment across the city from me. Did not make as many trips home as I ought to have, and my guilt was undermined. Whenever I was permitted to discuss how crucial I missed Oliver's easy existence. The sprat I remembered was developing into someone I knew a little bit, and that the conclusion soaked beyond what I observed to confess one weekend to my parents. They would be leaving the city for a Oliver is left alone on the company retreat. My mother called me her voice for 3 days. With a solicitous tone, I inquire if I could visit him as she is old enough. She stated she needed to take care of herself, but I would feel more at ease knowing you. Are there any instances where I felt more guilty? Compared to everything else, it wasn't such as my extensive weekend plans, and maybe hanging out with Oliver might be an opportunity to reunite once I got there. Oliver gave me a salute at the home. Door with his trademark slanted smile, long he mocked, time no see foreigner. Drawing me into a brief, yeah, I answered, rolling my eyes, yes. But he grinned and said, you missed me. He laughed. Moving aside to allow me entry into the house appeared the same as ever neat, but lived in with a subtle blast cleaner scent. It felt weird to be moping in the air, returning as though entering a time capsule. When I was a teenager, we spent the first Oliver sent me an update this evening. His ambitions and his musketeers at the Academy for the Council as I took part in and bits of my own life. It was pleasant. To speak in order to close the growing distance between us over time for a period of time, it seemed to be unchanged, yet after several hours, I began to observe effects. Regarding Oliver that I didn't previously know, he was not a sprat right now, he was high. His voice was deeper and his shoulders were wider. He exuded a peaceful assurance that maturity that was absent the previous. When I truly focused on it, it caught me off guard, and I prepared myself, struggling to adjust the perception of I had always known the small family with the young man across from me that the following evening we would conclude our regale and remodeled the kitchen as Oliver recommended. I'm watching a movie, he said. Browsing the available options on the TV isn't one of those dull. Excuse me, I said. Photographs you like feigning offense at my taste in the film is flawless. He frowned, ultimately choosing a comedy that we would viewed a dozen times as the first. When the credits rolled, he fell upon the settee. His lengthy legs were stretched out next to me as he settled in for a bit, and it's simple to ignore everything extra, and simply take pleasure in the same jokes made us laugh at the same time. Recited words we were familiar with, and felt into a meter that seemed secure and comfortable. However, occasionally I would catch Oliver observing me, not in a manner that was odd or unnerving, but with an intensity that caused a flutter in my gut. I convinced myself that he was my family after family. Nothing was there. Something strange about the way he gazed at me was present. When the film concluded, Oliver stretched and gave a nutnik, saying, I am, he said. I'm going to grab a drink. I got up and went to the kitchen, remained on the settee while browsing my phone while I waited for him to return. However, after a few seconds, I heard his, "Hey, Aaron," said the voice from the kitchen. "Desire a commodity?" "Yes," I replied. "Surprise me." He came back and he was carrying two pairs of soda pop glasses, gave me one before reclining. This time, his knee brushed down closer, against mine, and I experienced a shock of commodity that I was unable to adequately describe. "Thanks,
I was unable to adequately describe. "Thanks," I said, attempting to speak quietly. Steadily, he signed while holding his belt. We sat in silence and said, "No problem." For some time, the subtle hum of the with the TV blaring in the room, I attempted to focus on the phone, but I could sense his warmth and presence next to me. In a sense, it was abstracting so close that I wasn't ready, so I positioned myself uncomfortably changing, uncertain of what due to the peculiar energy in the There is enough quiet in the room for college new musketeers, a completely other life. Maybe he shrugged, but it wasn't the same. You are the person I can always talk to. You are aware that when the impacts were difficult, I lowered my voice hard. What do you mean? He hesitated, his gaze darting to the bottom before reuniting with mine, just following Pereira's heavy workload. And Mama was constantly busy, so it seemed like I was frequently by myself. But you were always. You made it there. His words of guilt made my heart ache less. Sweeping over me in waves that I hadn't recognized, the significance of my absence had made him realize how crucial he would. Without ever stating it aloud, I apologized to Oliver, but I still said, I didn't understand how you felt. He signed once more. A tiny smile tugged at his mouth. It wasn't your fault. You had your own responsibilities. Handle, but I'm happy you are. I answered, now, me too, extending my hand to give him a shoulder squeeze and say, and I am always. Then you know that I'm here if you need me. Yes, he acknowledged, his smile growing. Everything briefly felt normal, comfy, and simple once more. Yet, as my hand acted on his shoulder, I arrived sharply concerned about the air pressure, the way his voice grew softer as I drew my hand back, as it touched mine. I turned abruptly, my cheeks flaming. I murmured, clearing my throat. Anyway, down. Presumably, we ought to get some rest. It's getting late, so he stood up and consented. He stretched, which was a smart idea. Shattering at the bottom of the stairs to return the favor. Good night, Jack, I replied, attempting a smile. Good night. I exhaled as he faded upstairs. Didn't know I'd been keeping my studies were a chaotic muddle, and I was able to not get rid of the impression that commodity had changed between us, but I was unable to put my cutlet on what it was, comparatively. I switched off the TV and went to the kitchen to clean my glass. Now that the home was quiet, the slight hum of the refrigerator, the only noise that interrupts the eye gazed out the window for a moment in silence. While observing the trees MC swaying in the moonlight, my thoughts are struggling with research that I was unable to decipher when Eventually, I headed to bed to sleep. Did not come naturally, so I stayed up for, it seems like hours were spent staring at the ceiling and attempting to interpret the odd pressure that had become Oliver's statements on the house and his glum appearance. The way he would talk to me about everything felt important, yet I was unable to elucidate why. But I was certain that commodity would be. And finally, I would discover that I woke up the following morning to the a faint melody can be heard floating up from. I sat up swimming in the kitchen and confused, and looked at the time. Last but not least, I had let the sun prior to getting dressed. I was high in the sky. Swiftly, and went downhill after Oliver could hear the music playing in the humming, a tune in the kitchen while listening to the radio, while preparing his breakfast, He was wearing sweatpants and a basic t-shirt. His hair was a little untidy from sleep, resembled the sprat I used to so much tease and look after, but simultaneously, time he didn't. He was getting older. Tone secure, which surprised me. He looked up as I was walking and murmured, "Morning." I cooked eggs and said, "I want some." "Thank you for taking a seat at the table." He set a dish before me and took a seat. His effortless smile across from me makes it difficult to remain in my thoughts for a long time. We ate the warmth in friendly stillness, bright sunlight pouring in through the windows and giving the space a golden light. Oliver responded abruptly, "This is nice." Having you then breaks the silence. "Yes," I said, "it feels like the old days." It does smile, but as I mentioned, I couldn't get rid of the sensation that impacts were different from the cozy familiarity with our partnership had been swapped over with commodity that I was unable to reasonably name item that caused my coffin to strain. And my studies, race, and my best efforts, I knew it wouldn't go away. So I pushed it away. Passed by in the Uidsi A days down the morning. Of daily life, but the underlying stress. He sounded lifeless between Oliver and me. Calmer than when I was humming along with the radio while he dismantled the kitchen. While I was enthralled with tiny activities to prevent letting it seem too much. Like all things, every word has a weight that I was unable to disregard. By the time lunchtime arrived, Oliver recommended watching because he felt restless. Another film, but I wasn't feeling it. "Why don't we take a walk instead than sitting still?" I advised Ed to hope for some fresh air. Oliver's smiling sounds would help me clear my brain. "Okay, let me catch my sneakers." We set out into the peaceful streets in the neighborhood, surrounded by a variety of plants. And, well, it was the type of land with groomed meadows. That felt the same regardless of how important time went by, and we strolled beside drooling on the side over nothing in specifically his classes at work. The canine neighbors that growled at everything that made it feel effortless once more, like, entering a meter that we hadn't installed occasionally, but in fact, as grounded and indicated that I should accompany him. But I hesitated, briefly before settling into the swing. The chains creaked loudly close to him. Leaning back, I said, "This location hasn't altered somewhat," he remarked in a colored with, "Yeah," I smiled. "Nostalgia. Without a doubt. It seems like we spent half our non-age." Then, most likely due to, "We always do," he added, laughing. "Often accused me of pushing me on the swings when I told you that I could. Since you constantly hopped off, I did it myself, and fell into the slush I threw back. Mama's smile made me swear to keep you." To get out of trouble, he chucked his perspective. "You were moving toward the horizon, constantly watching out for me, naturally declared out loud, 'You are my little family.'" Didn't immediately reply to his expression, becoming more reflective. "Have you ever considered how different consequences if Dad were present more?" I was surprised by his question, and I looked at him, unsure of how to answer. I suppose I finally said, "But you know you've done well enough. You may be proud of yourself without him." His gaze briefly touched my thoughts. His aspect of vulnerability made my coffin. "Thank you," he said. "But that still means for a long time." We sat there in silence. The domain cat calls, sounds, rustling in the breath, and chittering leaves. It filled the void between us and was a tranquil moment. Yet the strain from prior to the action directly below the face. In the end, Oliver got up and brushed his hands on his jeans. "We ought to go returning," he said. "It's beginning to get cold." "Yeah," I said, after his lead the silent trek home, which seemed to go on forever. Between us, heavier, and I was unable to shake it. The impression that we were dancing commodity that neither of us could address when we returned to the I was prepared to withdraw to the guest room's security and get my head. But Oliver had different ideas. He continued, grinning, "Play a game." As he grabbed the press clunker's regulator does, "You're on the dishes tonight," I said. Grateful for the diversion, for the we dropped into an easy meter in the next hour. The horse sloth and the competitive batonage reducing the pressure that Oliver gained, as he normally did, the majority of the rounds. However, I was able to hitch a couple of palms. Crucial to his chagrin, by the time we completed, it seemed like the odd energy from earlier had, at least temporarily. For the time being, I'm not doing the "as we switched off the press," I added "dishes." I'm crossing my arms in a fair faux defiance. He laughed and said, "Enough. I'll let you." This time, the remainder of the even after the evening, we continued to eat and chat like royalty regarding the upcoming days planned, and finally became accustomed to our typical rituals. But as the house became more peaceful, then the pressure started as the night went on. To return, but I was unable to get rid of the sensing that the commodity was re-establishing implied commodity between us, but impossible to overlook. But recently, that I was lying in bed at night, staring at the ceiling commodity that I hadn't expected, heard the floor's gentle creak. My heart leaped beyond my room, and I barely listened as the steps increased. Jack Oliver's knock also got closer. Voice was hesitant, so I sat up, my palpitations arguing, "Yeah, can I come?" "In?" he inquired, and I hesitated. Looking at the timepiece, the house was late and quiet save from the slight hum of the putting the refrigerator down. I asked, "What is wrong?" Said, I need to talk to you." I could hear his voice a little bit as he spoke. My legs swinging over the side of the day. The door creaked as the bed said, "Okay, come in." Door, and Oliver entered. His unable to read his expression, he closed the resting against the door behind him for a pause before moving across the room to take a seat. "What's going on? Near the edge of the bed on?" I inquired in a firm voice. Despite the "my gut is churning with anxiety," he did not directly respond to his question. "At the bottom, fixed." "I have been letting a lot go lately," he stated. Ultimately about us, and how crucial his remarks warmed my heart, you know. Race, and I plan to maintain my facial expression. "Oliver, you are my family," I said in a neutral tone. Said exactly. We mean a lot, of course. To one another, which is how families function. "It's more than that," he remarked in a throbbing a little. "You've been, in a sense, there is no bone there for me. You've always understood things differently." I began, Oliver, but he interrupted me. Don't want to sabotage his words. Snaily. "But you must tell me how I'm not sure how essential you are to me." His words stuck in my head. "What do I do without you?" The air was so full of meaning that I was unable to fully process. I looked at him on my research, arguing that the strain between us finally reached a head as Oliver's words took hold. The stillness between us was really heavy, extending much longer than it ought to. Have I said commodity out loud? Nothing came out of his aspect, but anything kept focusing on my vulnerability and looking, and I sensed the walls I'd accurately constructed across the ages, I remarked, starting to crack Oliver. Eventually, I speak softly, yet firmly. "I doubt you understand how difficult this is." He lowered his eyebrows for me to hear. He shook his head, furrowing. "I am not attempting to hinder your effects. I just demanded to say," he stated, "it to release it." I took a long breath out, stroking my hair with my palm as I attempted to compile my research. "You mean a lot to me as well," I uttered. Yes, but Oliver and I are siblings, have consistently looked out for one another, as that's what families do. More than that, he spoke in a, it's pulsing, because I shook my head. I don't see why you're tensing your casket, stated, but it felt like an empty statement. We have both been as I spoke to them. A lot, particularly with Mama, and given how much Pear is gone, it's normal to feel closer as a result. Therefore it's not bewildered, he said, his voice now more steady. I know it's not, but that's how I feel right now. Typical, but I can't act like it doesn't. I got out of bed and started to pace the tiny space as I attempted to repurpose. Everything about my education was a mess. Conflict between wanting to comfort him and the unquestionable perception that commodity had gone horribly. So why, said Oliver. Looking at him, we can't keep. Speaking in such a manner is unfair to his expression wavered a bit for either of us. I am seeing a flash of pain on his face. He said, I'm not asking you for anything. Simply insisted on knowing the raw, I was struck by the honesty in his voice. Unable to speak, I returned to my seat on the bed. Shoulders become heavier due to the, I don't know. The circumstance weighed heavily on me. What should I say? I acknowledged that you still don't must say anything, he said. I simply was unable to keep it to myself at the moment. The pressure in the room felt oppressive, almost tangible. I wanted to correct the impacts, to restore everything to its original state. Was in front, but I wasn't sure how we needed, I said, trying to think of a way to get past this. Oliver, you are my family in the end. That won't alter anything, he jounced. Slowly, but his expression stayed unsure, saying, I don't want to. He said that you were the only one. Who truly understands me? You won't, I responded firmly. Lose me. But we must establish limits, because this isn't commodity on which we can linger in silence. That came next was heavy, yet essential. After a time, Oliver got to his feet. I apologize for the slow and deliberate movement. I could hear his voice a little bit as he spoke. Not intend to cause you any discomfort, but I am aware that I spoke in a mild tone, yet I'm not concerned about you, but we must be Oliver. Be cautious for our mutual benefit. He jiggled once more, wallowing at the door for a second before finally leaving. The gentle sound of the door closing felt liberating behind him, yet the my casket's pressure did not lessen. So I sat. They gaped at it for a long time, trying to make sense in the empty room of all that has just transpired, and I'm not sure how. But I'm by myself. Required room as crucially as I did, and the consequences would subside with yet. As the day went on, the quiet between us become more difficult. To buy fall, I made the decision to give it a shot. I introduced myself to him in his sitting on the side of his bed, in his room with. He looked up with his headphones on when I pulled out the headphones and knocked, smiling grudgingly and saying, Hey. As I entered, I asked, How are you? Enduring? He signed his aspect. Falling to the bottom, I said, I am fine. Sat down next to him, giving him some room. Between us, to feel at ease, I am aware of effects seem strange at the moment, I said, but I wish for us to resolve this. But I don't want. I don't think there should be any pressure between us. Furthermore, he stated, I don't know, but still. We figure out how to fix it, I said, smiling reassuringly. It's going to take some time, but we'll arrive eventually. Looked at me, his face softening. He thanked me for not freaking out. I just responded, Your family, I will always possess your back. The strain somewhat decreased, and after what seemed like days, I finally sensed a small pause, and we spoke for a while, continuing to guide the conversation. Academy Musketeers moving into lighter themes, as well as the next weekend by the time with the weight on my casket. I left his room. Had somewhat lifted, but that evening the home became silent once more. Couldn't get rid of the sensation that were not fully addressed by Oliver's remarks, his emotions and the undeniable intensity of the days that were spent with me, making me agitated and unsure, and despite my best efforts to move else, I realized that this was far from that night. There was silence throughout the house, yet I lay awake with nothing on my mind. Staring at my study's ceiling, churning Oliver's earlier remarks were repeated in my brain. His honesty and his vulnerability, the burden of all that he would, I convinced myself that the affects will go away. Returning to the idea that this was only a bump in the road, but I wasn't sure in my heart. And it also took place around, I heard faint footsteps in the hallway at night. My coffin stiffened as they approached. I paused at my door and sat up. I also held my breath while I waited. Energized each inhalation, enlarged by the Oliver Y stated in silence. After a moment, my voice steady yet low. We can't maintain going back and forth about this is unhealthy. I know that he repeated it for both of us. His tone was almost like a story, but I'm not sure. How to forgive his candor was disarming, and I positioned myself to lean forward a little, as though in the physical distance separating us might, perhaps may close the emotional distance as well. I said exactly that you must confront it. Hayden bowed his head, fluttering in uncertainty. His face. What do you mean by that? My heart was racing as I dithered. Sometimes I thought about what I was saying. Slowly, the only way to get over commodity is to cease escaping from it in order to recognize that his aspect held line. Burrowing his brow, he repurposed what I said. Are you saying that I'm saying that? Kindly suggested that you might need to give up holding everything inside. Feel it for yourself so that you can finally. His eyes widened a little as he let it go. Jack I, the consummation that's developing on him. All right, I shouted loudly, extending my hand to put a hand on his. It will only last a moment. Nothing more. He remained still for a while. His gas aspect latched on mine at that moment. The room's weight bearing down on us. Additionally, he hesitantly leaned in. Our compact lips made contact with the lightest encounter, hesitant and brimming with the weight of the feelings that were implied. It was over. Almost as quickly as it started to go. The stillness hung thick between us. Oliver drew back his face a bit, a mix of surprise and inquiry. I'm sorry, he stumbled, his voice throbbing. Don't worry, Oliver. I didn't mean no. I offered it myself, I said, and he gave me a look. In the viewpoint of a substitute, without stating, damn, I had a pretty gorgeous family. I kind of enjoyed it. So I kept on repeat it with a little hesitation. Leaned in one more, and we shared a kiss. Once more, heavier this time, as though we were both attempting to determine what the lines were. We finally paused for a alternate. And I reached for a specific location that started a commodity that is completely outside the bounds. Incredulously, he met my gaze, and I went farther without saying a word. We both took things a step further, and our actions were insane, I must say, but it was enjoyable. So good. At the end, it was incredible when after we were both done, we lay down there. Wow! Recognizing what had just transpired, Oliver broke the pause by saying, I don't understand what to think of it. In fact, it's okay, I responded, abruptly interrupting him. Now that it's finished, we may proceed. Gazed at me, his eyes full with inquiries, but he remained silent. He stood his motions slowly, cautious, but too hysterical to bother the delicate component, we would arrange good night, Jack, he murmured. Still. Night, I answered, observing his departure. When the door snapped shut, the room I gave a tremulous breath behind him. Examines a tornado of emotions. Although the experience had been brief, it felt important a line was crossed, but perhaps one that would enable both of us to locate clarity. I had no idea what lay ahead. Retained, but for the first time in a long time, I sensed a small stop-gap that we might traverse it jointly in the morning. With Oliver's arrival, the house seemed lighter. I'm having breakfast at his address. More at ease than we'd been in days. Discussy the day's plans. The conversation felt relaxed and effortless, similar to a positive step, and I cut to that pause as the hours gone when the moment finally came for I also, Josh. Leave Oliver led me to the door. Was not yet at home, yet it seemed like this was a commodity that was actually a blessing. I insisted on handling it myself. Thank you, Oliver remarked, grinning softly, for staying. But sincere, it meant a lot, and I'm happy I did. I say that I would return soon. We'll continue our conversation and find a solution. He shifted his facial expression. I think we will. Because I drove down in the rear-view glass, the house got lower. Despite the burden of all that had remained with me for the next few days. I knew it would be delicate, but for the first time in a long time, I thought we were headed in the correct direction, which was enough of my apartment existence. Went before its typical meter, yet the remembrance stayed with me that evening, and I set up, I'm letting Oliver more often than I saw, to acknowledge I was curious about how he was handling, whether he had established the clarity he needed. He texted me a few weeks ago, saying, he just wanted to express my gratitude once more. Clearer, and I'm doing okay now. I looked at the correspondence for a long time prior to taking it one step at a time. I'm happy to respond. Time all right. I'm always available if you need me. His reply to me was straightforward. I know I will be all right. It wasn't precisely checked, but it was a positive move, and for the time being, that was sufficient even to this day. I'm not entirely sure what to make of it. I'm interested in what other people think of, is what I've done, and what we've done, okay, completed. If I feel embarrassed, kindly let me know in the comments.